Dr. Ray Cross received his undergraduate degree from Washington and Jefferson College, his medical degree from the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine, and completed his postgraduate training in internal medicine and GI at the University of Maryland and Baltimore VA Medical Center. In addition, Dr. Cross obtained a Master of Science degree in clinical research at the University of Maryland. Dr. Cross is a senior AE for the American Journal of Gastroenterology. He's authored over 200 journal articles, has co-chaired the Clinical Research Alliance, was previously professor of medicine and director of IBD at the University of Maryland, and now is the medical director for the Center for Inflammatory Bowel and Colorectal Diseases at Mercy. So we are thrilled that you're here, and I will turn it over to you. Thanks so much, Ray, for coming.
Thanks a lot, Adam, for that really nice introduction. What I was asked to do is talk about transitioning from early to mid-career. And I think when you're at this point, I made a few assumptions for my talk. One is to really transition from early to mid-career, you already should be an expert clinician in the management of IBD, and this applies to clinical and basic science researchers alike. Locally, you're recognized as a clinician, educator, and researcher. And the reason I put an asterisk is it's really hard to be a triple threat, and many people are going to focus on one component of those three, but all of us have some involvement in all three of those arms. Research can also be scholarly activity, writing reviews, et cetera, case reports. You should already have been involved in administrative and community service at the local level. You have identified clinical and scholarly collaborators. And around the time you're transitioning to associate professor, depending on your institution, you should have about 15 to 25 publications. And then what I tried to do here is I tried to look at clinicians, educators, ops people, and researchers separately, because I think the criteria to move from early to mid-career is different depending on what your focus is. So as a clinician, it's really important in your early career to develop a niche. I just put some examples here. It might be imaging. Intestinal ultrasound is very hot right now. Dysplasia detection, advanced endoscopy and IBDs, dilation, stricturotomies, ESDs for difficult polypectomies. Many women get pigeoned into women's health and IBD, and that can be good or bad. There's some people that focus on extremes of age and older patients. So that's a very interesting niche as we have this silver tsunami of older IBD patients coming. There's interest in prehabilitation for patients who are going to need surgery, and for frail elderly, diet and complementary alternative medicine. There's probably more of these than I just stated. And really, regionally, you need to have a regional reputation. Your referring docs need to know who you are. They need to feel comfortable that you're going to manage their patients. This is a point where you need to try to get invitations to local and regional talks. These can be cold emails. Having virtual options now makes it easy to do talks and not have to do a lot of travel. At this point, you should be invited to advisory boards. So pharma should be interested in you at this point in your career, and that will also help you network. As an educator, oftentimes when you start out early in your career, you're going to be doing small group sessions and smaller lectures, maybe doing morning reports or noon lectures for the residents. But as you advance to mid-career, you really want to move up to larger lectures, advocate for yourself for those larger didactics in medical school teaching, local and regional lectures. And this could be patient education. Also, don't forget advanced practice providers. They're managing the bulk of community IBD, and they're very eager to learn. There's opportunities there. You want to join committees locally and regionally, and that's how I got so involved in the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation. It was really at the local level first before I got invited to do things for the NSAC. You can consider an advanced degree in education if this is going to be your career path. This is the point where you're becoming an APD with a goal of becoming a PD or going into a larger role in medical school teaching. Your goals as a researcher, similarly, you're going to need to develop a research area niche. And I've heard Miguel Reguero say when he got to University of Pittsburgh, he leveraged surgery, and that's where post-op Crohn's came from, because there was such a surgical dominance at Pitt when he started there. At Maryland, I had no interest in telemedicine, but there was a researcher who was at a point in his career to mentor, and he was doing telemedicine, and we applied it to IBD. So leverage your local sources of excellence, figure out what your institution does well, And you could also consider an external mentor, and this can be a little more challenging, but it is possible. If you have a career development award, you're going to be transitioning from a K or a smaller grant to an R or to larger grants. I never had a K award, and I've had successful grants funded. You should start to develop independence from your mentor. You should have things of your own. The MS degree I got was one of the best decisions I ever made. So I think you need to consider that if you haven't done it already. Extend research beyond your institution, collaborate. When I first started in IBD, it was not as collaborative as now. Now there's these huge networks of people that help one another to get research done. They often donate their time to make it happen. So it is a very helping environment now for research. This is the time where you're going to serve as a local PI for collaborative research that could be federal, foundation, or industry. Serving on a grant review committee can be very, very helpful. It really helps you learn what reviewers are looking for. I'm on the Red Journal. I'm the senior AE for the Red Journal, and being a good reviewer is helpful. It also helps write better papers. And at this point, I think joining an editorial board is very appropriate. So the next slide is your goals as an administrator. Become involved in meaningful committees. And I underline meaningful because my former boss always liked to try to get people volunteered for committees where there was little work just to build your CV. And it's okay to have a few of those, but I really think 20% of your time should be spent on something you really love. Like if you're going to donate time doing something, it should be something that interests you, even if there's work involved. So I never agreed with that strategy. I think you should find meaningful committees to be part of. This is where you can get an MBA. It could be very helpful in managing a clinical program. That can be an IBD center or program. It could also be an ambulatory clinic, or it could even be specific programs within an IBD center. This is something that Pat Young from the Navy does every 5 years around the time of his birthday. He takes a long walk up this mountain with his dog, and he sits and he reflects on what the last 5 years have been like. And I think it's really important, and it needs to be where you can really reflect. Probably not at a vacation with a 6 and a 4-year-old running around and you're trying to manage them. So, are you happy? Are you doing the things that you want to do? Do you have growth opportunities? Beyond salary, do you feel valued? Do you feel important at your institution? Is your voice being heard? Do you have supportive colleagues and leaders? Do you have sufficient work-life balance? Burning out is a big threat in IBD, and you have to have balance. Consider what's really important to you. Do you like what you're doing? When I was thinking about this new job that I took, I learned that my kids really listen to what I say. And I was thinking about taking an industry job, and my oldest son looked at me and said, "Hey, what are you crazy? You like seeing patients. You never complain about that. You complain about X, Y, and Z, but not seeing patients." It really helped me solidify my decision. And is your external support system happy? Happy wife is happy life, the same way for husband. So are your wife, husband, children happy? If other support system happy? Because if not, it's going to be hard for you to be happy in your job. If the answer is yes, then that's great. Keep doing what you're doing. You should still set goals and reevaluate regularly. Meet with your mentors and leadership to assess your progress. Try to get real feedback. And as I said, repeat this process every 5 years. Your next transition around that time is going to be full professor. What if the answer is no? This is where it's really important to know what your worth is to the institution. You have to understand how money flows clinically in IBD. It doesn't matter if you're research, education, you need to know where the institution makes money. This is a personal communication from a friend that will remain nameless, but he did a sabbatical and found that the contribution margin per IBD patient, so pure profit for your institution, is $9,000 per patient per year. So if you have a panel of 1,000 patients, that's 9 million a year that's being generated just from you. And you can't assume all those patients are going to stay if you leave. So that is very important. It's something you're doing in your institution truly unique and difficult to replace. If you're the only person in your institution who's doing ESD, that's incredibly valuable. What support do you have if you're not happy? Do you have strong collaborators that can be clinical, research, education? Do you have a strong mentor that the institution listens to? Do you have strong leadership that is actually going to knock a door down for you and help you? Do you have a protective shell? It's helpful if you have someone that can act as an intermediary for you. What alternate options do you have? That could be locally, regionally, or nationally. What phase in life is your support network in? If your kids are entering middle school and you're thinking about moving them across the country, you're not going to be the most popular dad for probably a year. Making that move when your kids are younger or when they're off to college is easier. The next step, if you're unhappy, is you should be meeting with your mentors and colleagues, meet with your division chief, and discuss a possible transition with your external support system. If your first attempt is unsuccessful, and this is really the way it's always been, the only way to get resources for yourself in most academic centers is to obtain large or multiple grants, obtain protected time from the School of Medicine and or the hospital. They may have an administrative stipend that can go with that. Promotion used to be associated with a very significant raise. Nowadays, those raises tend to be less substantial. And I highlighted the most important one. You often have to have an offer from another institution to really be able to leverage your local leadership. If you're seriously considering a move, you should be aware of the new relationship effect. This is why institutions want you to come and visit, because for the last several years, you probably haven't been told how great you are. And when you go somewhere new, they want you to be happy. They want you to come. And so they're telling you all these great things. And I don't know what the psychological thing is with that, but it definitely occurs. You want to really try to critically compare the institutions about what their pros and cons are when negotiating leverage colleagues that are external. Ask them to look at your asks. And I did that with Miguel Reguero and David Schwartz from Vanderbilt. They were very, very helpful in helping me formulate my ask. The question comes up, when do you disclose to your colleagues and leadership? I think if you want to stay, if you're using this for leverage, probably after or just before the second interview. If you want to leave, I wouldn't let anyone know until you have the contract in your hand. It's not really their business, but that's just my personal opinion. And this is really important. If you're going to do this, you have to be prepared to leave. So if the institution calls your bluff and you don't go, then you will never, ever have any leverage. So if you do this, you have to be prepared to call the moving van. This is an important question for your external support system. What's most important to you? Do you want to advance your career or do you want to get divorced? And that sounds pretty harsh, but if your support system loves where they are, and you're trying to move them states away from their brothers and sisters, mom and dad, et cetera, and the kids that are in college in that state, it can be really, really a big stress on your social life. And as you do this, try not to burn bridges. Try not to, if you're leaving, saying a bunch of bad things about the institution. It can be really challenging when you're unhappy, but if at all possible, try to take the high ground.